So guys, for those who don't know me, and like Tony said, Tracy and myself, we are blessed because we speak around the world together, we do things together, we've owned businesses together. And the one thing that's always happened, we've just actually got back from Latvia. We spoke to 2,500 people there. And the interesting thing is whenever they introduce us the first time, they always say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, the Beauty and the Beast. I am so sick and tired of them calling Tracy a beast. It's just like, really, now, enough. But so a little bit of my background, where would I fit in, where have I been in life? You know, I always find it fascinating. Somebody stands and speaks, but you don't know who they are, what they've done. I've never wanted to work for anybody else. I would call myself a serial entrepreneur, purely from my upbringing and I think the lessons we learn in life. I came from a single parent family. My dad always used to say, son, the harder you work, the more money you're going to make. That was the first biggest lesson I got in life. That was rubbish. Working hard won't give you anything if you don't find the right vehicle to work at. You've got to find what you're going to work at, because my dad worked exceptionally hard and he was broke. He didn't have time. How many other people are out there doing the same thing? And that comes down to really where are people, what do they want? And those were the lessons that I've learned. Started my first business young. Trace and myself had a manufacturing concern. We built it up to one of the biggest of its type in the country. So when it comes to businesses, I think we know quite a bit certainly about small business, entrepreneurship, and then we've gone into networking. We've become leaders. We went out and studied. We've done NLP courses, negative emotion therapy courses, purely because what really, really drives us and what makes us tick is how people think. I think this is the most crucial thing. What goes on between those ears of yours, and mine are a little bit bigger, but what goes on between those ears of yours is ultimately your whole life. That's everything, because your perception is your reality. Everything that you do is your reality. You know, I know we're in February already. Can you believe 13% of this year is already gone? Yeah. And the question I like to ask people is, if 13% is gone and you do exactly for the next 87%, you do what you've said, will you have achieved what you've set out to do this year? I always like to ask people, anybody around the table here have a New Year's resolution? Yeah. You had a New Year's... Anybody not going to put up their hands no matter what question I ask? So I hate that word resolution, New Year's resolution, for one reason. It's a to-do work for the first week of January. Because if somebody doesn't put it as a goal, they quit on it.
Goal rather than resolution.
That's what I'm saying. Because a resolution, most people quit on. And then they say, oh, but I don't have to get back on tomorrow. But if it's a goal, you can actually get back on. But I also talk about goals in a different light. I don't believe, if the goal doesn't have a vision or anything, it's not even a goal. What's more important is what drives you. And maybe I just want to pre-frame getting into the talk, or getting into what I really want to talk about. And maybe if I can start off, I want to start off with the intelligences. I've got a friend, and we've sat down, and he's a double MBA. He teaches a lot of intelligences and that, but never practical. Like he says, everything is theory. I like to talk practical, what's important. And just to pre-frame on the intelligences, and every one of them are a talk, so I'm not going to go into them all, but we look at, bless you, 6 intelligences. And the first one is rational intelligence. What is rational intelligence? Rational intelligence is pure common sense, which... Why they call it common sense is because most people haven't got it. No, I'm serious. How many people don't have common sense? You see what they do and that, but that's where it is, and that's why we talk about it. The next one is physical intelligence. And that's a very scary one, because most people look at you and they judge you by how you look. There's a thing in psychology called diagnosis bias. How people will judge you by the way you look or what they've heard of you. They don't, what they think of you immediately. It's actually a very scary thing, and I think we all do it. I think sometimes we meet somebody and we're judging them already, or we judge their dress and that. And sometimes it's not a good thing. Well, I don't think it's ever a good thing, because if you look good and here the guy inside is totally messed up, but you think, why? Because he's dressed well, he looks well, we judge him. Intellectual intelligence is the other one. Intellectual, we're going to talk a little bit, because that's the key that I really want to talk about, mindset. I want to talk about where our results are because of our minds. Emotional intelligence, I would love Tracy to maybe, that's the topic I would love Tracy maybe to touch on here. The reason being, I think that is the real key to everything that you do, everything in life. And when I talk about emotional intelligence, I'm talking about relationship intelligence. That's where it fits in. And no matter how good your business is, no matter how busy your business is, everything that you do in life is dealing with people or your emotions. And that is the key to, I think, today's time. I was talking to Gary a little bit earlier, and we were talking a little bit about what he's doing and where the world's going, and, you know, technology and this fourth industrial revolution and how people are panicking. Some people, we got hope in the country again. The biggest thing is most people are talking, if you've got a company today, the number one thing to teach people is emotional intelligence. Yeah. That is the thing that you've got to teach people. And it is it's a topic on its own, but it's critical to understand. It's very rarely taught. And I think financial intelligence, you know, it comes down to, I owned my own business for many, many years, and nobody had really taught financial intelligence. Nobody really understands financial intelligence. I was talking to a youngster the other day. I was actually coaching him, and he actually sat down and he said to me, listen, he needs to talk to me about his finances. And I said, no problem. I said, have you got a budget? He's an engineer. He's late 20s, not even having a budget. He didn't know what his spend was. He didn't know what he was making. He didn't know how to save. And, you know, we sit around a table like this and you think it's him. It's 90-odd% of our country that does that. And that's where financial intelligence is. So the one I'm going to handle is, I'm going to go most probably into mindset. But before I do anything, the question I want to ask you is, I would like you to define success for yourself.
Sorry, you said 6.
How many have I got? The last one is, I'm going to hit big time, is spiritual intelligence. Now, please, spiritual intelligence is the one where I'm actually starting at. What is spiritual intelligence? I was talking to a guy the other day, and he said to me, you know, Martin, spiritual intelligence, I'm not religious. I said, but that's not spiritual intelligence. I said, by the way, you said you don't believe. You do believe. So he says, no, I don't believe. I said, that's exactly, you believe that you don't believe, but you believe. Now, obviously, if you are religiously intelligent, it's going to fit into your value system. So what is spiritual intelligence? Spiritual intelligence is what drives you, the reason why you're sitting here. What are your values? What are your beliefs? Why do you do what you do? That is the key behind every single thing I'm going to talk about. Everything that drives you is that value. Now, I was talking to somebody once, I think even Tony mentioned it to me. It was quite interesting because a lot of the time, Tracy and myself have got a course called Realize Your Full Potential, and what we do is we check people out first so that they know how they learn, they know their values, they know their personality type, so they can deal. And in there we've got a value determination process. And you do it. And one guy said to me, Martin, but that's not my values. My family is my number one value. I said, you are spending all your time and money elsewhere. So that you might in your heart say that's your value. Where you spend your time and your money is where your values lie. So you've got to understand, and you can change it, obviously, because maybe why did I start my first business at 20? Did it give me what I wanted? No, because I was expecting more time and more money. But people didn't tell me that it takes a little bit longer to start your own business, to run your own business. People didn't talk about challenges. I was 21 years at that time. So, but it comes back down to your values and why was I doing it? You know, so that's why I want you to go back to what defines success for you. So if you know what your values are, what would define success? I love this quotation from David Henry Thoreau. When one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he or she has imagined, they will meet with success in the common hours. Why is that so important? Because most people don't know what they're advancing for. Most people haven't got a frigging clue what they want. We get into life and we just start off and we head in a direction because of coincidence, or conditioning, or chance, or happening, and then we carry on our life, and there is nothing that drives you, and you will never put your life and your heart and soul into something if it's just an event to get paid or just to earn money. It's not going to be there because it's going to add to that value drive. And that's the key. What's going to add? One of our biggest things is we want to be significant, and it came from years when we weren't. So Tracy and myself, that was a drive for us, and it came up in our value determination. Funnily enough, education came up, and Tracy and myself both made the top half of the class possible. We just got a matric, we did. But why was that so important? Because we didn't have, so we wanted more. We wanted to educate ourselves more. Our biggest value and biggest driving force is our family. I've always wanted to be, I wanted to be the best husband. That's done long ago. Then I want to be the best grandfather. But if my values aren't connected to being the best grandfather, how does that work? And as I go through, maybe you'll understand. So once you know what it is, I believe the next most important thing, and this is critical, I always talk about a 10-year timeline for dreaming. I'm not talking about that today as a business. I'm going to talk about you have to have a timeline. So what year are we in? 2018. If you're sitting here, what do you want to achieve for this year? Where would you like to be by 2019 this time? Why do I say a year? I actually think a year is too short. The critical time period I would look at in anything when I'm talking to anybody is 2020. I think 2.5 years is a great, great goal to have. Why would I say 2.5 years? Because people way underestimate what they can do in 1 month, 1 year, but they way overestimate what they'll do in a year and way underestimate what they can do in 3 if they can create the right behaviors. So 2020 would be a really nice goal if you're sitting here looking at business, looking at your life, where would it be? That would be great. But let's say 2019, 2018. Why have I left this blank? Because this is the most critical year of your life, 2017. Why is it the most critical year? You can't move forward if you haven't got a base point to move forward off. So where were you, and this is not a goal-setting talk, but write down your goals, review your past. Why? Because you have to know where you are. Because would you all agree with me, you are exactly where you want to be in life today. You are exactly where you want to be. You've made the choices, you've made the decisions, your life is exactly where it is because of the choices and decisions you made. And that was quite fascinating for me because when I looked at that, I thought to myself, I hated that. I did not want to be where I was. I didn't want to come from the family, a poor family. I didn't want to come from a broken marriage, but I was there. Why was I there? Because it was their choices. It comes a time from there onwards which you change your choice. You change your results. When I was talking to Tony the other day, I've got a saying that it actually tweaks my mind every time I say it. And it's quite a fascinating saying because the guy says, if you are born poor, it's not your fault. If you die poor, it is your fault. Guys, you know where the problem poor comes? Everybody thinks I talk about money. Poor is not money. Poor is a mindset. If you've got a bad marriage, you're poor. If you've got a bad relationship with your kids, you are poor. If you've got a bad relationship with time, you are poor. So poor is such a big thing because poor is what's going to drive it. Poor is what's going to drive your businesses. Poor is the key to what's going to drive where you are. I brought my kids up on everything in life is choice. You are where you are because of the choices and decisions you make. The choice that you make when you walk out of this room is a decision. It's yours. You own it. It belongs to you. But that is exactly why your results are there. Where do your results in life come from? How do we move our businesses? That's from our behaviors. What are behaviors? Habits, systems, rituals, everybody calls them different, whatever you want to call it. I think your daily habits define who you are. It's fascinating. In the year 2005, I sat down in an event. I actually sat down, it was an auditorium, there was a few thousand people there, and somebody had achieved, and I was just listening. And I wrote down something for myself. I wrote down 16 habits that I was going to live my life by. And I'll tell you why I did it. So when I was sitting there, I think the first one was, it's my spiritual belief, read my Bible, drink a glass of water and everything. And then further down, I wrote, I want to dress well every day and shave every day. And then I carried on writing down what the principles. And every time I show that to people, they say, why do you do that? I said, realistically, if I don't shave today, it could be a weekend, is it going to make a difference? No. If I do it 2 days, will it make a difference? Not really. But if I stop doing it for 3 days or 4 days, it becomes a habit. And if that is what's part of my wife doesn't like it in that, what am I doing it for? And I think if your habits define who you are, and it's so easy to get into bad habits today. And I'm going to come back to habits. It's exactly what I said to you. If my value system is to be the greatest granddad in the world, and I'm not looking after my health, what am I saying? Am I living my value system? If I'm not worrying about my finances, am I looking after my value system? About 5 years ago, for the second time, I had a gun to my head. Every one of my family ever had guns to their heads in this country. But the second time I had a gun to my head, it was quite fascinating because I took off time. I took off about a week. And I just went and read spiritual books and leadership books. That's all I did. I went out and sat down. And after a whole week of getting this through my head and everything, I came up with what was important to me. And the biggest thing was, if I wasn't taking responsibility for my life, there was going to be consequences to be paid. And I was not going to pay those consequences. Either my wife or my kids were going to pay those consequences. If I got shot and maimed, who was going to look after me? If I died, did I leave my family enough money? Whatever it was. But there's consequences to be paid with every one of our actions we take. Do we ever think about those consequences later on in life? And these are critical because your irresponsibility or your responsibility is going to lead to an action. So it's just, I hope this is not too heavy. I do believe with behaviors, how you do anything is how you do everything in life. And this is what I find fascinating. I see a lot of people just going through life on a daily basis as if tomorrow's another day. And if you're not working at maximum intensity at whatever you're doing, you're never going to fulfill that dream or that purpose. I love to use the example of the South African rugby team. You remember year before last, we had the most fantastic year. I think we lost 12 out of 12. We certainly lost. But it was fascinating because I learned lessons, and this is where I love to learn lessons, is by stories, is by happenings. And I went back and I started thinking about that. And, I heard the story just before the Italian game. The coach didn't want to train at maximum intensity. He was scared that if he trained at maximum intensity, the players would get injured and then he would have a problem. So they trained at about 65% intensity. What they didn't realize was that those Italians were going to come them at 100%. And when they came at 100%, they weren't ready for the game. Because if we're doing anything at 65, what results, what habits, what behaviors are we going to get out of it? And I look at our rugby 50, our sevens team, complete different thought process. They don't care how many tries you're going to score against them. They'll outscore you. The intensity level it's a different mindset. So I just think with your behaviors, those are critical, but how do you get your behaviors? You get your behaviors from your thoughts. This is quite a critical or an interesting one because, and I'm going to come back to talking about that just now, but your thoughts control your feelings or your emotions, which control your actions, which equal your results. So when your emotions are high, your intelligence is low. Has anybody ever noticed that? So in good and bad times, I start thinking of some of these kids. They go out, they take a girl out or a guy out, and the emotions are high. The next minute you hear they slept together or they've done something silly. Why? Because their intelligence is normally low. How many times do you have an argument with a spouse or a business colleague or whatever it is, and you can't bring back what you've said because of high emotion? And your emotions actually control, your emotions control the actions you're going to take. So it comes from your thinking. And that's why we'll get onto mindset, which is actually the results that you got. Your thoughts come from your conditioning. Now this is quite interesting because a lot of your conditioning is coming from your children, is from your childhood, where you grow up. Those 7 years are most probably the first 7 years of your life. But your conditioning can change. This is conditioning. What we're doing now, you're being conditioned. You're listening to somebody else. If you read a newspaper or you listen to the news, you're being conditioned. So no matter in life, we are being conditioned all the time. Who we're hanging around with, what we're doing. But so the conditioning can change if you surround yourself, but if you understand the mind and you understand the subconscious, the negative is always sitting there if that's what you're going to be focusing on more importantly. So I read a book many years ago. It was quite an interesting book. It was, if you want to walk on water, you've got to get out the boat. And he talks about the two things in your life that are really important. And the one is the cognitive way. It's the way you think. The second one thing is the law of exposure, the two laws. The law of exposure is who you expose yourself to, what's your thinking pattern, or what's their thinking pattern, who challenges you. So we can talk about that. 80% of success in life is psychological, 20% is mechanical. It's comes through, you can read many, many books on that. And then the last one, I'm going to come back to this conditioning and thoughts just now, because the last one is self-identity. Now, self-identity is, let's be honest, guys, that's who you are. That's your self-esteem, that's your self-discipline, your self-worth, your beliefs, your values, the personality, your emotion, every single thing, your physical features. You know, there's a thing, part of self-identity, which is nature, and there's a part which is nurture. Now, nature, you can't change. I'm white, I can't change the color of my skin. The only person I know who could do that was Michael Jackson. But I got blue eyes, I'm this tall, I can't change certain things. Nurture, I can change. Nurture, there are ways I can look after. If I look after my health, if I look after my brain, if I, invest in myself. I got a big saying, and it's, I always say to people, never be scared that your kids don't listen to you. Be scared that your kids are watching you. It's not your kids, it's everybody. Everybody watches what you do. They don't care what you say. It's a value system, it's your integrity, because whatever you do, other people are going to do. I mean, many a time, and because Tracy and myself sometimes are in the limelight, because we don't know if we speak in front of 10,000 people, obviously in a shopping center, there's a chance you're going to get bumped into. You know how many times people have come up to me and actually said, I see what you do. We sat at a launch of a wine bar one night, and I had people come up to us afterwards. 3 people came up, and they were together, and they said, do you mind if we have a drink? So I said, absolute no problem. They said, we saw you on stage, we've heard you, and we were monitoring and watching if you do what you say. Were you pouring Tracy's drink? Did you stand up for her? Did you do this? And you don't realize, if we're in business, people don't care what we say. They watch what we do. You can, no matter what you're doing, if you're not behaving in accordance with that value system, if you're not behaving in accordance to what you're saying, people look at your integrity. They look at, why would they deal with somebody? Because trust, you can only get once. You lose trust. It's one of the hardest things in business to ever get back. In life, it doesn't matter who it is. It's one of the hardest things. So, I just want to go here a little bit. When I'm going to talk about mindset now, I just want to show you how you brought up and how your mindset really affects everything that you do in life, and how our conditioning and our thoughts bring us up, because we'll go back to behaviors. But maybe, everybody heard of Robert Kiyosaki? He put out active asset-based. He put out his first book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My kids loved it because they realized they didn't have to go to university because it's an antiquated education system. No, they don't have to. I think education's good. But the second book, what I learned from the second book wasn't the principles. And, I like to have fun with, when you talk about the cash flow quadrant. I never knock a job in life, guys. Never. Anybody here got a job? You got to go to work. Anybody? So, when you look at a job, the only difference with a job, it can never pay you what you're worth. It can only pay what the job is worth. So your mind shift's got to be, so what else can I do with my income? What else can I do to diversify? That's just, but it's not a bad thing having a job. Why would somebody ever be embarrassed? But it does stand for Journey of the Broke for one reason. You can't be paid what the job is. You can work as hard as you want to. There's a limit to what the job can pay. There's a limit. Self-employed is most probably even worse. Because if you actually understand self-employed, you are virtually everything. I mean, think of how many doctors. I got a doctor friend once, and I just said to him, I said, you're like a prostitute. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you charge by the hour. You just offer a different service. You see, when we're on this side of the quadrant, we are always spending time for reward. Now, it's not a bad thing, because 95% of the world is here. 5% of the world's wealth is here. 95% of the world's wealth is here, and 5% of the world work here. Why? Remember when I said conditioning? When we were brought up? Who was brought up with the same rule as me? Go to school, work hard, get a degree, and get a job. Anybody in the room told that? How's that working for our parents? You see, our parents were taught the same, and our parents' parents were taught the same. So when we wake up every day, imagine when that's so instilled into your brain. You go out, every single thing that we do in our life is focused on our thoughts. Our thoughts are, if I'm not spending 8 hours at work, I feel guilty, or 10 hours, or whatever it is. If I'm not spending the time at work, I feel guilty. Am I right? Somebody feels they're guilty. I say to somebody, we've got a conference coming up. I'd love you to meet this guy. He's a leadership guru, one of the top leaders in sport, one of the top leadership gurus out of Australia. You know what the first thing people ask me? How much is the ticket? Why? You go and ask somebody, I'd love you to buy this book. What's the first question they're going to ask you? How much? Because you've got a spend mentality. How I spend my time. Everything that we do here is about spend. What people on the right-hand side say is you ask them, you say to them, listen, I'd love you to come and see this guy. The first question I'm going to say to you is, what's my return on investment? What am I going to get out of this? How can I think different? Because if you don't think different, no matter what you do, if your thinking keeps going where you are always going to end up with the same results. No matter what you do. Let's talk about behaviors. I've got a friend who plays golf. And I was talking to him, and he says to me, but he's a real crack golfer, really. You know, I mean, I'm not good, but I like to play with him, let's put it that way, because I'm not going to lose. So he says to me, no, he's sick and tired. He's sick and tired of it. He now is going to go and hit 1,000 golf balls. So I said, that's really good. I said, so what coach are you going to go to? No, I don't need a coach. I'm going to go and hit the... I said, that's fantastic. So you're going to get better at being worse. What's going to change in his behavior if he doesn't change his mindset and if he hasn't got somebody helping him? The behaviors will never change. And your behaviors will always stay the same. Your results can't change, no matter how many behaviors you change. You can say, I'm going to get up early tomorrow morning. I'm going to do this. What's going to change if you don't change your mindset? And the big problem in life today, and when I looked at my first business, nobody was there to challenge me. Nobody was there to help me. And it wasn't in times where we have the books and the podcasts and the CDs and the environment like you've got here, where you can sit down and discuss. And I don't care who you are. I don't care how big you are in business. There's always something to learn from somebody. And I think that's the biggest lessons I get. Sometimes the lessons I get are from the people who know the least, but they come up with the most amazing thought processes. So we can always learn from one another, but it's who we associate and how we get around. So I don't really want to talk too much about behaviors just yet, because honestly, guys, how do we change our behaviors is we have to think about these two, and I'm going to call those two mindset. And I'm going to just talk about a couple of books and maybe just a couple of mindsets that we go through. Has anybody ever heard of Carol Dweck? She wrote a book called Mindset. It's fascinating. I'm going to just break it down quickly into just 5 things when she spoke about it. And she says, when you've got a fixed mindset, you will never grow. your mind is set, your belief is set, and your thoughts are there. Growth mindset, that's where you can be developed. And what she says is there's a few headings in life where you look at, in your life, in your business, in whatever thing you're doing. How do you look at challenges? I can tell you, honestly, if this is where you are today, so that's your dream. You're sitting there, you want the prize. Everybody wants whatever they're looking for. Am I right? You've got a goal, you've got whatever it is. If you want a prize, and that's why preparation is so important. Because if you don't go back and prioritize and actually spend time looking for what you want and working a plan, you'll never have it. That is why the next most important there is a strategy. You have to have a strategy, guys. You're sitting here, but I think you're here because you're strategizing. You're talking about how do we move on. You only learn when you review the past and you go back and you say, what happened? What were the challenges? And people with a growth mindset, they embrace challenges. They look at it. So if you're sitting here and you're having a challenge in your life, there is nothing wrong. It's how you're going to handle it. And if you're going to avoid them, I don't know if you'll ever grow. Obstacles. People with a fixed mindset give up easy. How many people get into business and they quit quickly? I'll never forget my first business. Seriously, I had no money. I was a 21-year-old. I was a young dad. And everybody around me wanted me to fail. You know, my family wanted to say, you see, I told you so. My best friends would haunt me. Come on, guys, let's go for a drink. I was working. I had responsibilities. You know, so there was obstacles. You give up easy or you persist in the face of setbacks. Are you prepared to go through everything? Fixed mindset when it comes to effort, they see effort as fruitless. Work ethic will win every single time. But Malcolm Gladwell says it. He wrote a book, 10,000 Hours. I think the book, Outliers. Anybody ever read Outliers? Yeah. Okay? Phenomenal book to read. Phenomenal book to read. But what I love most about what he says talent is overrated because you most probably find Tiger Woods wasn't the most talented. But he had 10,000 hours of hitting a golf ball by the time he was like 4 or 5. So even with talent, he had it. So it doesn't mean you're the most talented always. It was just that. But where he says opportunity on one hand and deliberate practice on the other. Work ethic will be critical, but deliberate work ethic. That's why when I sit here, I say, who's leading you? Who's challenging you? Because you've got to be challenged by somebody in life. You've got to be led by somebody. It's not always... So for you to lead anybody, are you being led? And led or mentorship, and I heard Tony talking about that. Mentorship is not somebody who's better than you, or coaching isn't, but mentorship is somebody who's been there, who'll give you different advice, can look from the outside. That's all it is. It doesn't mean... Coaching is a different story, but I also find coaching quite intriguing because Tiger Woods has got a golf coach. I bet you Tiger Woods' golf coach isn't it better than him at golf. You see, it's a different perspective. It's from outside, looking and getting different perspectives. So people with a growth mindset see effort as a path of mastery. Criticism. People with a fixed mindset ignore useful negative criticism. People with a growth mindset learn from criticism. Now, I think you ought to be very careful when you criticize anybody. I think there is a way of doing it, personally. But I don't know if anybody responds to criticism. I always believe if you make somebody feel better, there's different ways of helping people. But I also don't want to be on a path in life and never be told where I'm going wrong. I never want to be, because I'll just end up where I'm heading otherwise. So that's the idea. Criticism, don't take it as criticism always. Maybe take it as constructive, that you can change, that you can adapt, that you can move on. This is just things that we try and do. Feedback. Do you take everything personally? Or do you find lessons and inspiration? Or do you identify areas that you can improve on? I think we can improve every day. I certainly can improve on my marriage, I can improve on my year, I can improve on my life, I can improve on my business. I sat down with Tracy last year, and I'll be honest with you, we said at the end of the year, we review our goals twice a year. And I sat down in December, and when I reviewed my goals and I reviewed my life, I was highly disappointed with myself. Highly disappointed. Why? Did I have a good year? Yes. Did I travel a lot? Yes. Did I have a great... Yes. Did I achieve my full potential? No. You know, I've got when I talk about full potential in a year, there's a story. What is a day worth in your life? What is 24 hours worth to you? What is 24 hours? I don't think you will ever know until it's passed. And then I looked back and I saw my brother-in-law. He died at 60. What would he have given to have another day with his wife? Or another day with his children or grandchildren? But we just go through days sometimes and we wish the next day off, or we... You know, and that's the most critical thing. What is that value? What is that value? And then people with a fixed mindset, when they see success of others, they feel threatened. And they certainly feel threatened by others. And people with a growth mindset find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. I don't think there's a better thing that's ever driven me in life is success for other people. Because all I've realized, if they can, I can. I don't care who it is. I just think we can learn lessons, and with a growth mindset. And when Carol Dweck put this book out, and we applied it to our business, because we started applying to ourselves, if we wanted to grow, we had to look at all those points. We had to say, where are we? What do we want? And I just found that was a fascinating book. And then another book on mindset was completely different. It was a book by the Arbinger Institute. Has anybody ever heard of the Arbinger Institute? They wrote a book called Leadership and Self-Deception. I honestly think, from the bottom of my heart, every single person can write that book down, read it. You will apply it in your life. It's your family life. It's your everything in life is your perception. And when these guys put that book together, I sat with the biggest mentor in the network marketing industry of the world. And I had a day with him. We were walking around, and we had a lunch for 2 hours. And he spoke about one book. He spoke about one book that he believed everybody in the world could read, and it was Leadership and Self-Deception. And the Arbinger Institute have got another book called The Anatomy of Love, but the third one they've just put out, and that was a critical one. It's called Inward Mindset. Outward Mindset. And they talk about the difference between inward and outward. And you know, it's fascinating because I believe that every one of us are leaders in our own right. There's nobody who's not a leader. We all lead. We're either leading our family, we're leading our children, we're leading, somebody's looking up to you. And we've just got 4 attributes of a leader. What are the 4 attributes of a leader in our opinion, or certainly Trace in my opinion? And John Maxwell will tell you, if you look at leadership, everything is influence. You know, if you don't have influence, I disagreed slightly. I said you can have all the influence in the world. If you don't have vision, who's going to follow you? So you need vision and you need influence. And then the third attribute, I think, is a critical attribute of every single person, is integrity. Is your word your word? What do you say? I've spoken a little bit about that. The fourth attribute is the interesting one. And that's the one the Arbinger Institute talk about, is humility. Now, humility is not thinking less about yourself. It's just thinking about yourself less. And most of us in life, we get involved in businesses and we don't try and grow other people. So we become the magic. Now, if you own a business, what are the critical things you're trying to do in life? I don't know about you. If I talk to anybody about business, I try and hit normally 3 points, depending if on their products or service, but exclusivity is one. But what is the other 2? Leverage and scalability. Now, if you can't grow leaders, how do you leverage yourself? So if you keep putting yourself first, and I'm the kingpin, and I'm the number one, what are you going to grow? It's always going to be about me, me, me. And as a leader, you're trying to grow other leaders. You're trying to duplicate. That's the number one thing I believe any business should be doing. How do I lift people up? How do I promote, within? And I think that's maybe one of the biggest problems that's come out of our country in the last 9 years. Well, 2 things. Integrity is, there hasn't been integrity. So while you don't have integrity, and then you don't have, you don't have humility to put others first. So how do we change this? How do we change our mindset? What do we have to do? We've got to change, obviously, our environment. Has anybody ever watched that Warren Buffett documentary, by the way? Anybody else? You know what I found fascinating was when he was talking to that class, and he said, listen, guys, I will, if so, those guys who haven't heard, so Warren Buffett sitting there, he has the wealthiest guy in the world, and he's talking to this bunch of young guys, and he just said to them, listen, on Monday, you can come, I'm going to buy you a brand new car. What car do you want? You know, it'll be wrapped in a ribbon, it'll be in a bow, there it will be. But you can choose a car, and there it is. And then the one kid said, so what's the catch? He says, the catch is you're only going to have one. How would you look after it? You'd wash it every day, you'd look, that's it. You're only allowed one in your life. One. Never another one. He says, but guys, that's like your brain. You've only got one. How are you looking after it? What are you doing to look after your brain, your thoughts? And that was so impactful, because I think a lot of the time we get involved in business and we just go gung-ho. We don't plan, we don't think, and out there and off we go. And we never advance our own thinking. And that's why I think it's so critical to understand how our mind works and what we're putting in to move on in life, to move forward. And in today's society, there is not an excuse that you don't or you can't get involved in a system where somebody can help you, where you've got a mentorship like this, where you can talk to one another, where you can surround yourself, where you can listen to podcasts, where you can get CDs. There's lots and lots of information out there. But number one thing is, I do believe if you're involved in a business, what is the type of information you're looking for? So if you're involved in a manufacturing concern, surely you would be focusing on a lot of manufacturing, besides the how to deal with people. Because no matter what you say, dealing with people is the most critical. If you don't deal with people, everything we do is dealing with people. Everything we do. You know, somebody said to me, Martin, I sit behind the computer. I said, when you go and ask your boss for a raise, you're dealing with people. When you wake up in the morning, you got to deal with your wife, whatever it is, everything. So besides actually getting your juices going, are you deliberate about what you're reading? Are you deliberate about what you're wanting to learn and where you want to focus? And that's where you can get a lot of podcasts, a lot of books. Guys, please don't get me wrong. I've read many books. I've tried to study further. I'm really passionate on how the brain works. I'm really passionate on people. But you know what I've learned is when I read a book, it's one person's opinion. It's only one person's opinion. If I listen to a CD, you listening to me, it's only my opinion. You can say that guy with big ears is talking the biggest load of rubbish. And you're right, because that's your perception. You can say that guy's good looking and he's talking sense. You're also right. So whatever you believe is you right. That's why the more you immerse yourself, and why I like books, and I was never a reader. Why I like books is because I hate being told what to do. Anybody else? We all. So when I read a book, I'm reading to myself. That's the way I look at it. So I'm reading to myself. I choose to take it, but I can't read one book on that topic or one. I love reading Flipboard or whatever they call it. There's some really good articles. If I read one article or something, that's just one person's opinion. Rather read and immerse yourself in something that you can actually make your own opinion and then work with your own opinion. So you've got to. And then I think the most crucial of everything is association. You know, when I got into my business with my wife, and that was quite a story because Tracy and myself went out on our first date at 13. She went and got married. I went and got married. We got back together at 30. We've been together 28 years now. We're married 25, I think. So, but when we got into business together, the first thing she said to me was, Martin, if we want to really grow this thing, we've got to associate with people in this industry. We've got to get around. And it always reminds me of the story of the Japanese koi fish. If you take a Japanese koi fish, which is 2 inches, and you throw it into a bowl, what happens? It grows to maybe 2 inches, 3 inches max. If you throw it into a pond, give it the same amount of food, it grows to 2 feet. You grow according to the environment in which you reside. Have you ever thought who you're hanging around with? Have you ever thought that they are inspiring your children too? Because that is where it all starts. Everything begins and ends with you. Everything begins and ends with you, and then it goes out because it's your belief. So who are you hanging? Who's going to challenge you? Who's going to lead you? I think the most critical thing is having a mentor in life. You know what's a mentor? A mentor is somebody who's just going to challenge you. Who can I be accountable to? Because if you're not accountable to anybody, will anything happen? I don't know. I think it's too easy to walk away. We set a big goal in an industry many years ago. In 2006, we set a big goal. And our mentor in that industry is Peter Cox. And Peter spoke to me. I phoned him every day in Australia. Was it easy? First of all, I had to phone at 11 o'clock at night, at minimum, 11 to 1. I don't think he listened to me once. I didn't care. I didn't phone for him. I phoned for me, to keep me accountable. To keep me accountable to goals. And I think if you don't have anybody that you can be accountable to, it's too easy to walk away. It's too easy to do something different. Coaching is different. You don't want to keep making the same mistakes in life if you're not checking up with somebody else. Now, why, if you know, I know it's very difficult in business in today's time because your opposition is not going to help you. That's why you need to get in an environment where you get around other business owners who've got the same like-minded thinking, who can give different ideas. I think that's critical. But I know one thing. When we had our manufacturing concern, the other guys weren't going to give me their secrets. That I can tell you. Everybody creates their own system, their own secrets. Everybody keeps it. When you get out into a different environment, you start sharing that. You start learning. That is why and I'm sure Tony will talk about Peter Cox, one of the greatest, and listen, just in my humble opinion, because I've been around many people, the biggest thing in life, I was challenged profusely by this guy. He's got an unbelievable following now in Australia and his Leadership Dynamics banner. He's very, I would say people would either like him or hate him, but love to hate him. Because sometimes he gets into the bottom of your heart or your skin, where you've got to look at you if you wanted to grow. If you've got to look at, and that was for me. You know, it means nothing to anybody else. If I take it, I'm taking it for me, my family, where I want to be. If you're sitting here, you're not sitting here for anybody else. You're sitting here for you. You're not sitting here for Tony. You're sitting here to move your life wherever you want to move on. We all want to move on. And I think that's the critical thing. So having a mentor, having a coach as well is different. Guys, of course it costs money. Of course sometimes you've got to pay. Is that expensive or is that cheap?
It's cheap.
It's cheap. It's cheap rather than making mistakes other people have made. And sometimes I see as people get older, they think they don't need it, they stop growing. And that's one of the biggest things in society. We don't grow. I just try and immerse myself with different people, different thinking. Doesn't matter who it is. Nobody's better than me. I'm not better than anybody else. I can learn from everybody. But of course, I am always looking for somebody who can challenge me, who I look up to as a mentor side. So that's on the mentorship, always. So basically, you know, that's what I would love to go through. I don't know if there's any questions on any of my thought process, any thought processes yourself. Anybody, anything to say, anything to do, but I can tell you one thing. You'll never change your result if you don't change this. You're just going to keep the same behaviors. The results will stay the same. So if those are the results where you're happy within your life, just keep doing what you're doing. If not, I honestly believe these are the principles. And I know they talk to you about goal setting. You know, I do believe there's a difference in goal setting. My personal belief of goal setting is there's 4 attributes to a goal. And that's you've got to have a pact with yourself because you've got to have passion about a goal. You've got to have accountability. You've got to communicate and you've got to have tenacity to finish it. As in with a business. If you don't have the tenacity to get through the tough times, you can just keep the same results. Go for it.
One of the interesting things, I remember that Buffett
Movie.
documentary was every morning when he gets dressed, he's got 3 different coloured cups, and he tells his wife to either put $1.50 or $2.50 or $3.50 in it, and it depends on how prosperous he's feeling, because it determines which breakfast he buys at McDonald's on the way to work. So the richest man in the world decides every day.
So what he does is he looks at the stock market, and if the stock market was down yesterday, he buys a cheap meal the next day, and if it was up, he buys the $3. But you know what? You see, that's his discipline. So what happens is if we don't have disciplines every day, you know, I've got a discipline, but you know what's amazing, and this is more on goals. What I find is when you set goals in your work, you create different behaviors, but there's a domino effect. So you've got to start on one. So he starts on that, the rest of his day follows through. Because there's a domino effect that goes through. I know if I run every day, I eat healthier. Why? Because I've started my day with my run. Subconsciously, I don't want to waste it, so I'll drink my water. You know, it's just a whole domino effect. And he does. He's got an unbelievable ritual of his whole life.
Was that TED Talk? Make your bed.
Yeah, that's the Admiral. So at least you can get into a decent bed at night or a made bed.
You achieve your first goal for the morning.
And that is critical. That's why I say my 16 list of behaviors, people actually sometimes laughed at it because I even wrote, drink a glass of water in the order. And I did it religiously to tick it off at the beginning. Now it's a habit. Now it's a habit because you've got to create habits that will create the right results, you know.
Interesting that Cyril Ramaphosa has invited people to walk with him in the morning.
Yeah,
So you can go and do your 5K walk with him in Cape Town.
Well, he's done the two things now. He's trying to promote health
Health,
and then he's using it, eh? He's using it very smartly, eh?
Very good.
But he's created his own habit now
Yeah.
and a brand. So I don't know if that just gives you a different thinking process, guys.
Thank you.
You know, just take away obviously what you believe and
Not what these million things.
throw away what you don't want to. But from there, Tony, anything else?
No, I think that's good. Are there any questions for Martin? Shannon, you cold? I think you're sitting underneath it as well.
I've got no jacket today. There's no ways I'm getting
It's quite
cold.
warm up here and it's obviously cold over there. Chase.
One of the things you said was obviously what you do outweighs what you say because people pay attention to your actions. One of the questions I had is, I would assume that you know about the love languages and that kind of stuff. So to someone whose love language falls under words of affirmation, they tend to weigh more on and put more importance on what they say. Although I agree that what you do does outweigh it, but I think that also affects the weight in certain people's lives and how they receive your actions and words.
So why, when we do our course, why do we want everybody to know the personalities? Why do we want everybody to know the love languages? For one reason, not for themselves. So obviously, the first thing in life is you've got to know you.
Yeah.
That's number one thing. So if you know your love language, that's great. But isn't it more so if you're working with somebody and their love language is words of affirmation, yours is gifts. Yours is gifts, not words of affirmation. But you know you want to get something out of them and you walk up to them and say, great, well done. You know, fantastic, what you did yesterday. Will you not get a better result out of it? So the key is knowing other people. So if you know yours, that's cool, but you've got to know theirs that you can use that and apply it in their life. As is with personalities. You can be choleric and full on, and they phlegmatic. You're not going to get a result screaming and shouting at them. Or if they're melancholy, you're not going to get a result. If you learn audio, but that person's kinesthetic, you're going to have to show them how to do it. Doesn't matter what you are, because you're not going to get the result from the other person. So everything in life is knowing who you are first, and then taking it to the, using and applying that. To try and make other people feel important in what's important to them. If somebody's a gifts person, I promise you, wrap up that coffee in a ribbon and give it to them. You'll see what they'll do for you in a day. Give them a chocolate, because that's who they are. But it is understanding.
I think the other thing is just to touch on that, is people still look at what you do. And you can, that's very clear with kids. But think about your staff or your customers. If you say we do this, but meanwhile we're doing something else, it doesn't matter what you say, right? They'll just look at what you do, and they'll look at the behaviours.
All right,
A lot of companies have got great mission statements. We value our people, but then they don't. So what's the reality?
That's integral.
You talked about reaching our full potential. I think it's a journey for me. It's a struggle, but what tips or guidance would you give?
So
someone?
What you've just said is your biggest problem. You're already telling your brain it's a struggle. So your self-talk is always saying, I can't reach my full potential. You've just told me it's a struggle. So what are you telling yourself? It's a struggle to reach my full potential. Obviously, changing your self-talk is the first thing. And that's the only thing in life, because only you can control you. So if you start saying, I'm on my path to changing my realizing my full potential, or I am realizing my full potential in what I'm doing, all of a sudden, because everything comes back to our self-talk and our self-worth. If your self-esteem is low, your self-discipline is normally low. So if you don't think much of yourself, and it's easier said than done. That is why, and it's another talk, affirmations is so important. Why? Because you're affirming your brain. It's just how the brain works. You know, your subconscious, your conscious, and what's situated there. So for yourself, start saying, I am who I am. And you start, if you feel good with little behaviors. That's why I always say to people, don't come up with these stupid behaviors and this somebody said to me the other day, and this was another thing, I wanted to lose 10 kilos of weight. So I said, that's cool. Why do you want to lose it? And he said to me, no, just because I want to feel good. I said, well, you're going to lose it and you'll put on maybe 15. And he said, why? I said, because you don't have a value to it. There's no reason. You want to earn 100 million rand a year. You can earn 100 million, but why? What are you going to do with it? If you don't know what you're going to do with it, it's most probably just going to go back again. But then with that, create a small habit. So if you want to lose 10 kilos, you don't look at 10 kilos. I always say, never look at what the result ever again, once you've set the goal. Look at the behavior that's going to create it. So you've got to say, today I'm just going to eat healthy and that you to lose 100 grams, 200 grams. So everything you do on a daily basis. So how do you start with yourself? You start maybe 1 or 2 affirmations in the morning and start affirming yourself, and then create habits that's going to help you achieve what your goal is. Because if you don't change that, so if you don't change your mindset, you're not going to change the habit. So change your mindset by affirming yourself, doing that, and then applying it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Small things, but your self-talk, that I believe mentally in all of us, every one of us, there's 2 voices. There's 2 dogs, one on either side. One's pulling us down, and the other one's lifting us up. Which one do we listen to? The one we feed the most. So if we keep feeding negativity, that's what we're going to listen to. If we feed, we can't. I can't. Now I'm not saying a ridiculous goal like I could never become the heavyweight boxing champion of South Africa. That's a ridiculous, stupid, because I'm too old on my body, but I could achieve in lots of other things that I put down. So don't go out on wrong things. Go out on, you could have one of the best businesses in the world in any industry, if that's your choice. Why? Because business is business. You can learn skills. You can learn what you want to.
Yeah, it's very powerful. There was years ago looking at weight loss, and we've got to wrap up, but weight loss, some people battle with, for example, at anything in life. When there's a goal, and it's quite a big goal, it's a major thing in your life. What you've got to start doing, you set yourself a small goal in some other area of life, like I'm going to tidy my room, I'm going to clean my car on a regular basis, and they set themselves an achievable goal in something else, and that creates a success habit, right? It creates I did that, therefore I can do that, and you start feeling better, so ultimately you hit your real goal. It's actually psychological improvement. So, Martin talks about his 16 points. This is a great thing to do. I did it as well. I also was like a glass of water every single morning, whatever it is, 450 mils, 500 mils, whatever it is, trying to get 750 mils, but don't always get there, but
I read my Bible first thing.
You do that, and then that goes, I feel good, make your bed every day. It is a great little video. If you haven't watched that, go and look at it. It's a great little video, because it creates that success habit straight away. It's really,
and it's also a good thing to do. It is a thing called the Pygmalion effect, where you lift other people up around you. And the more you lift them up, the more they'll do. But the more you lift other people up, the more you feel about yourself too. You feel better about yourself. So don't put that in place that you're trying to lift yourself up. Just lift people up around you. I was having a conversation the other day. It was quite sad. I live in Midstream, and I was having a coffee with a guy, and he said, no, he wants to pull out because obviously the demographics, and he doesn't feel comfortable there and everything. And I just thought it was so sad, because his view of what he sees and what's happening, but it's his reality. And I just said to him, if you just look different, I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm not judging you. We're sitting here. Why are you worried about what other people think and you're putting in your head only what other people think? You're not putting in what you're doing on a daily basis, your actions, your beliefs.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Let's give the guy a round of applause.